and we'll get into our presentation. This is the fourth of a series that we've done at Collegiate Sports Associates. We've got about 50 or more athletics directors primarily on the call today. Our intention is that this will be an interactive conversation between you and the profession that have quite a bit at stake in the coming months. During the course of our conversation, your mic will be muted. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, there's a chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can hit that and our staff will monitor it and let us know that you're there to make a point. And if you're asked a question by anybody off of our team, you can raise your hand if there's a feature for doing that as well, if you would like to respond to that. And then when you speak, if you would simply, you can hold down your mute button and talk while you are speaking. And then please, if you would, introduce yourself and give the institution and where you're calling from. So that's kind of our ground rules for today. Our team has been together now for almost 10 years. Brad Bates is on the line with us today. You'll probably remember Brad as the athletics director at both Miami of Ohio and also Boston College. He's now teaching at the University of North Carolina in their graduate program in sport management. So it's good to have Brad with us. And then my colleagues, Drew Turner, former associate AD at Old Dominion, and Clay Pfeiffer, who has multiple degrees, and he's really the brains behind our operation. Clay's with us today. So we're all on the line. We'll be managing this as we go forward. Just a brief note about who we are. CSA, founded 10 years ago. We've got 100 years of experience. Gosh, that sounds like a lot. And it is. Our team has worked in many different settings. We've done lots of searches and lots of consulting projects for a variety of people throughout the last 10 years, and looking forward to working with you in the years to come. I want to say thanks to those of you who are our clients and partners. You've been really good to us, and we really do appreciate that. So on to today's topic. We are joined by Dr. Kevin White. Kevin, a longtime friend of mine. You see that he began his career as an athletic director as a black bear at Maine when I was at UConn, and the two of us looked at each other and said, wow, how are we going to manage where we are and where we're going? Kevin's done it pretty doggone well, now the athletic director at Duke. I've known Burke Magnus for quite a while in his role throughout his career at ESPN. He is the executive vice president for acquisitions and scheduling at ESPN. Burke's really good to have you join us today. Thanks so much. And then my very dear friend, Ben Sutton, who actually got me into this consulting business. Ben is the founder of Teal Capital. I'll give a bonus to anyone who can tell me what Teal stands for. I know what it stands for. It stands for touch 'em all. Isn't that right, Mr. Sutton?
That's right.
You bet. So I met Ben, first of all, when he was the associate AD at Wake Forest, and he morphed that into ISP, which became a trendsetter in the business of college athletics, and eventually IMG College, and now IMG Learfield. So it's great to have Ben with us. And then I have already introduced Brad. So with that, that's our group today. I want to encourage you, if you have a comment or a question and you're out there listening in, please let us know, and we'll include you in the conversation. I'm reading a great book. It's called well, I can't even remember the name of it. It's a Winston Churchill book, and this got me to thinking about our crisis, because he certainly led in a time of crisis. This quote, "Never let a good crisis go to waste," that's in the midst of what we're dealing with today. So I'll begin the conversation today by asking any of you on our panel to talk a little bit about what you believe the long-term future is for college sports. We know that the immediate concerns are pretty horrific, but long-term, maybe there is an opportunity in this crisis to do something that really helps athletics long-term. So would any of you like to talk a little bit about what you think college sports may look like 5, 10 years from now after this? Maybe I'll start with Dr. White, since you're on campus, Kevin.
Hey Todd,
Yeah.
can you lose the big screen thing so we can see everybody? The document? Right now I can only see Winston Churchill and you.
That's the way it's set up. Then you should be, I'm sorry about me. Winston's not bad. It should be set up so that when the speaker speaks,
Okay.
you see their face.
All right. I just wondered if you could lose the deck piece, and then everybody's pictures would come back up.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, do that. All right, and I'll shut up.
Oh, let me go backwards. Sorry.
All right. By the way, while you're doing that, I think it's amazing. I just was adding up. You and Kevin White have had 9 different jobs between the two of you as ADs. Could y'all not keep a job?
Those
No.
are just the ones you know about.
Yeah, that's a very good analysis, Ben. That's a very clean analysis. You're smart. You've always been smart. Hey, Todd, have I been invited now to say something? Shall
Yes,
I? Or I don't want to burn everybody's time. We've got so many great people on this call here, on this Zoom, as we're zooming around here. Let me just say a couple things. First of all, to be on with 3 Hall of Famers, you know, gosh, Todd and Ben and Burke, it's quite an honor. And I mean that seriously. And I would tell you that, you know, Todd is probably connected, as I think everybody knows, the most connected player within college athletics. He's been AD at 4 pretty good places, great places. And of course, Ben is the entrepreneur extraordinaire. I mean, the godfather of college multimedia sports. I mean, and Ben just taught my class about a week ago, and he was phenomenal, as he always is. And then Burke is kind of the wizard behind the curtain. He's kind of the guy. He is the guy. He's the man within the broadcast property profession that maybe people don't realize that this guy has a big stick and has a lot of juice, and ESPN has been a great partner. So with that, you asked about the future. You know, I think if anybody would kind of sit in front of a group of ADs and aspiring ADs and others that are on this Zoom call and kind of pontificate what the future would look like, they'd be Pinocchio at best. I mean, nobody has any idea. I mean, I think we're probably on the advent of creating a new model. I don't quite know what that means. The more I contemplate it every day, I find myself deep in thought about what that might look like. But it perhaps might be more conservative. I mean, I think that's in the air, but it will certainly be more adaptive, more nimble. And those are kind of the isms that we hear a lot in this crazy, horrific moment that we're all battling for. But permanent changes, longer term, I'd like to think there'll be more scenario-based, Todd. And we're all involved in a lot of that. And everybody on this call is involved in a lot of scenario planning, I'm sure. We're probably going to have to figure out how to operate more efficiently. And I think it's going to require deeper analysis. You know, I found myself on a call with our group at Duke recently, not athletics, but the rest of the university, and kind of talking about we need to become more zero-based in terms of mentality. I think in higher education, we've always tended to add on, and nothing ever went away. It was always additives, and nothing was subtracted. And I think this is a time when we're going to have to become really, really disciplined. And by the way, you know, I found myself thinking about this morning, all morning, anticipating this conversation. You know, I think we got a real significant migraine in college athletics. There's no question about that. But, you know, higher education is in serious trouble. It's just not college athletics. We're a sublet. We represent 3 or 4% of these parent organizations called the Academy. And I looked up some numbers today, and there's about 3 million people in our country that are employed in higher education. And in higher education across 3,000 colleges and universities represents about $600 billion in terms of the gross domestic product. So, you know, we're a sublet, and we're going to go through some pretty dramatic reform. But at the end of the day, I think we also really need to acknowledge that higher ed is really tuition dependent. all the fees dependent, and higher education, I think, is going to look dramatically different. So as we talk about, long-term changes that we're going to confront, our parent organizations are also going to face those very challenging realities as well. So let me stop there and let the other my other two Hall of Famers here contribute.
I want to sort of point this at Ben, following up on that comment, Kevin. Ben, I mean, your reputation is thinking outside of the box and being a world-class successful entrepreneur. That's well earned. And you've been on the cutting edge of multimedia rights and sponsorship issues for over 3 decades. So as you look at the future, how do you believe the traditional sponsors and partners that have really helped underwrite a lot of the things we've been able to do in college athletics, how do you think they're going to respond to the current and future landscape, particularly as it relates to their commitments to colleges and their sports programs?
In the long, first of all, I echo everything that Kevin said, and I would say, having spent 9 years on the campus before I started ISP in 1992, that campuses are not known for being nimble. When you want to make change, it's usually like turning the Queen Mary on a dime. But so I think, as with all great crises, to reference, I love Churchill, so I love that. I never waste a crisis. I think that you will see some, I don't know if the word nimbility is a word, but I think you're going to see some nimbleness on college campuses like you've never seen. And I think it gives everyone a chance to look at a lot of different things. One thing that most athletic departments, in my experience, get right is the most important thing, and that is culture. And I'm a big believer, and we built a company that was based on I believe that culture eats strategy for lunch. So if you don't get culture right, you'll never get your strategy right. But the strategy on college campuses and in athletic programs is probably, so much of it's driven, like every other business, there's kind of a herd mentality. And so the reality is this gives everybody a chance to kind of tighten your belt, pause for a moment, and really step back and think strategically about how you're organized, where you prioritize your resources. I've been on the phone I talk to Mark Emmert often. I talk to Jay Monahan every week at the PGA. Adam and I have texted. I've talked to 4 conference commissioners at least twice each in the last 4 weeks. I keep a little notepad here on my desk. I've been on with 24 different athletic directors in the last 6 weeks, 11 of them in the last week. And fortunately, the only one that was calling me about a coaching search was Jimmy Bass, until John Curry called me last week. So I'm hearing a lot of different things, but I think it gives you a chance to really think hard about how, where you put your resources. I think it's tough because, the financial outlook in the short term is not great. And we can talk about how we all think, if college football is going to get played this year, and if it does, how it's going to get played. Will it be a shortened season? Will it be a delayed season? If there are right now 56 people on here, I bet you I could get 56 different opinions. We might all galvanize around something, and 3 days from now, it's like going to Baskin Robbins, there'll be a new flavor. And so in the meantime, I think using this time to really think carefully about where you invest and the stewardship of those investments. I've always believed that some of the NCAA minimum sport requirements were kind of out of sync. And you saw the group of 5 sent a proposal to Mark Emmert that there was either some acrimony in that because some of them wanted those proposals to be permanent as opposed to just a 4-year waiver. You know, but I think, you know, I don't think any school ought to field a team that they can't fully commit to financially and give that team an opportunity to compete for championships. And so I think NCAA and the member institutions need to be looking at that. I think you have to look at things like how conferences are organized. I mean, for those of us who now, like I've been inside where most of you are, but when you're outside and you look at it, you think, well, why are these 3 schools in this league and these 2 schools are in that league? And why wouldn't programs conferences get together and start kind of shifting players around to get them in the right, to get the square pegs and the square holes and the round pegs and the round holes? There might be an opportunity to look at some of that right now. There might be opportunities to get your geography right. I tell you, from Burke's perspective and my perspective, running a media company, when you have far-flung conferences and you don't have great rivalries, then it doesn't create great crowds at games and therefore doesn't create great television theater. So, you know, those things are all kind of interrelated. And for years, I mean, when I left IMG, I think our book of business around the media parts of our business was about $600 or $700 million a year. And we had sponsors ask us harder and harder questions because they got more and more sophisticated about college sports. And you know, some of those questions were related to, you know, really trying to understand that they were getting value for the investment that they make. And they felt like that, frankly, they got better feedback often from the pros than they did from college sports. And that some of our setup is so screwy that it was kind of hard for them to follow. So my view is I think as athletic directors, associate athletic directors, people who are on college campuses, I'm a longtime trustee at Wake Forest. I'm on 3 different committees right now studying and preparing, you know, Model A, Model B, and Model C for athletics for the university. This is just a great chance to say all the old norms are out the door. Hold on to the traditions, hold on to the culture, but really make everything else kind of be in play. I've talked to a lot of folks that they call me up and they say, well, we're going to play football because we got to play football. And I like to remind them that hope is not a strategy. And so we don't got to do anything. And you know, whether we play or not is not entirely going to be dictated by people on our campuses. And so there are just a lot of variables there. And so I would encourage folks to do when this all kind of broke several weeks ago, I was actually with Todd and a friend of mine that's on the PGA Tour and a guy most of you know by the name of Frank Beamer. We were out at my place in Pebble Beach playing golf. And Todd will tell you, I was calling my athletic director at Wake Forest while I was there, and I was like, it's time to come up with plan A, B, and C now. No football, some football, delayed football, social distance football. And believing me, if it impacts football, it's going to impact other sports as well. So right now, the entire focus is on football. The reality is if it has an impact on football, it's going to have an impact on everything else, not just financially, but in playability and everything else.
Hey,
so
Ben,
it's a great time to scrap everything and kind of think about places you'd want to start over.
that A, B, and C that you're talking about, those different scenarios, are oftentimes contingent upon what your partners and your support groups will respond to. So I'll sort of turn to Burke and ask you, Burke, you know, as maybe the greatest promoting a partner in college sports history, you know, ESPN being what it is and how much it's advanced the games. You know, you're an incredibly important partner. Ben has represented partners in other ways, you know, sponsors that have contributed dollars and cents. You've contributed dollars and cents. You've contributed exposure. looking at those scenarios, where do you see the continued support coming from not only ESPN, but folks out there who have been traditional partners of our industry?
Yeah, thanks, Todd, and thanks for having me here. Kevin, I appreciate the man behind the curtain description, although I'll steal a line from the Wizard of Oz and say, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
You're the wizard.
But nonetheless, listen, everything that Kevin and Ben have touched on is absolutely right. The way we're approaching things right now, from a long-term perspective is, in many ways the impossibility of even discussing some things that ultimately may happen here. And I'm not just talking about college sports. I'm talking about our entire portfolio, the sports landscape, in totality. It's amazing how quickly so many things that were previously considered to be impossible are now possible, or at least for conversation. So we're looking at the silver lining here as being, twofold. One is it's an incredible time to make big, important decisions. If at all possible, things related to your organizations, things related to legacy structures that, again, under normal circumstances might have been too difficult or too complicated to envision. And then to innovate. Like, the one thing we're really in a strange way looking forward to with some of our professional league partners who are very likely to stage competitions without spectators is the various things that we can experiment with in terms of a presentation. I'm talking about camera positions and audio and access, and to present sports to fans in a different way that, again, would have been really too complicated to put into place or even to try under normal circumstances. You guys saw what we did, hopefully, with the NFL draft this weekend, and that's a perfect example of how, even in the course of the last 6 or 8 weeks, expectations have been completely altered by both fans and by some of our partners in terms of what's possible and what's acceptable, and actually what turned out to be a pretty good experience for all involved. So long term, I think college sports is going to be just fine. It's too important, a part of the fabric of our country. It's going to take some time to weave through this. We are certainly, as I think our track record indicates, are not in this for the short haul. We're in this for the long haul. And yeah, we're going to have to, I'm quite certain, plow through some very complicated and different circumstances starting in the fall. I have, a college junior and a high school senior in my house as we speak. I don't think class is in session currently, but that, I have a front row seat as a parent as in terms of the communication that's happening between institutions and their student body. And frankly, it's to Ben's point, it's impossible to predict. We get communications from institutions one week that change the next week. And, and I think everything that's happening at an institutional level with the general student population and the educational mission is going to filter down into decisions that are made about athletics. But that being said, both from our perspective, the content's too important. Things will, I'll say, return to normal eventually. The normal may be different. The normal may be better. But we're not going anywhere right now. In fact, we're just trying to do our best, both with all of our content partners, to get them through, the short-term decision-making that has to be made responsibly to either finish a season, like in the case of the NBA, to frankly start a season, like in the case of Major League Baseball, and then ultimately to come back online like NFL, like the NFL, college football, all the college athletic competitions that would be scheduled to happen in the fall and the winter. So, and the last thing I'll say on this point too, Todd, is that from an advertiser community perspective, many of our partners are the same as your partners on the campus level. And the good news here is I'm really sensing no long-term pivot in terms of the interest of the truly important or most important advertising and sponsorship companies that are invested in college sports in terms of their interest long-term. Again, we're all making short-term decisions based on very complicated circumstances, which are not great as we sit here today. But do I see a any fundamental cracks in the foundation of it? I don't right now, which is good.
That's encouraging news. Appreciate you sharing that. I expect every athletic director that's on this call is thinking about 2-3 things. Number one, what can I do to make sure my student athletes are well cared for and we fulfill our obligations to them? But secondly, how am I going to pay for it? So, if you ask folks like you or Ben Sutton that what will be the immediate impact, I don't think anybody has been able to answer that question, but it's encouraging to hear you say that the long-term for support seems to be pretty consistent. By the way, I want to encourage everyone, if you have a question out there you'd like to ask one of these or make a comment yourself, you can either raise your hand and we'll call on you, or if you want to type in a question, we'd be glad to read that back to you. Kevin, any rebuttal or additional thoughts beyond what Ben or Burke added?
No, I really like what Burke had to say about at this point he doesn't see any cracks, and I'm taking that to mean in the foundation as we know at the enterprise, which we all love, which is college athletics. And I was thinking about this earlier today as well. Our business is so different than a lot of commercial businesses, and we still run a business, but it's housed or warehoused within a large nonprofit. It's kind of interesting if you think in those terms, and that parent organization, I think, is got a chance to get really impacted here in terms of financial negativity to as great an extent as college athletics, or perhaps even greater. But with that said, I love the fact that it sure seems to me the insatiable interest in college sports seems to be holding together. I don't know that we've really tested it at this point. Congratulations, Burke, the last couple of nights on the draft. I mean, that was to me, the numbers, the audience was phenomenal. And I think it shows that the American public was just starved for something sports related. And that's been a mega event anyway, but it does show that to me and to others. But there's an insatiable interest for college athletics, and that's not going to change. And what I started to say, I found myself earlier thinking about, this is an avocation for all of us within the enterprise, and it's for all of our spectators and donors. I found in the last couple of weeks, 6 weeks actually, every other week I've written to our 12,500 donors. And the only downside in that is a whole bunch of them write me back, and they want more, a larger response, and it's just hard to keep up. But the connectivity around college athletics it's tribal. It's incredible, and people are just so darn passionate. So I think Burke is right. I think the foundation is still strong, and it will be strong. But unfortunately, as we've all said to one another, and Ben said it really well, I mean, we're going to have to kind of create a new model, and maybe we will have to downsize or certain things or eliminate certain aspects. But it doesn't mean we might not integrate something different and upsize something else as we move forward. And once we get past this immediate, very, very tough period that we're in. But the next iteration, no question, is going to look different. It's going to be a a new normal, as everybody uses the expression of the day. We don't quite know what it is, but it will be different, and it doesn't mean it won't be bigger, faster, and stronger.
This is really sort of for, well, any of the three of you, particularly you, Kevin and Burke. You know, the ACC network is in its infancy. It's off to a great start. I've got it. I watch it. I think it was extremely well done and very positive for the league. Do you see the immediate impact of what's going on as being harmful to your network, and where is it going to go in the coming months and year?
Yeah, I'll take it, Kevin.
Go ahead, Burke.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's harmful in that it's been harmful to everybody's business, right? It's not, I wouldn't single out any particular thing that we do. You know, I think it's going to be, everything we do is going to be, I hope will have the same elasticity to it that we saw with the NFL draft. I'm going to keep harping that on that a little bit, because it really was the first thing at scale that really tested a theory we have, which is that when the time is right, and when, you know, if things can be done and maybe even done differently, you know, will people respond? How fast are things going to be able to snap back? And I think the NFL draft, you know, proved that, to Kevin's point, the appetite is insatiable. Sports is too big of a part of the American culture, you know, to, you know, again, not that it won't be changed, not that it won't be different, but it'll still be a gigantic enterprise that a lot of people are interested in. If, in other words, if we had said to the NFL a year ago, hey guys, we got an idea. We're gonna forget about what you've been doing as a live event. We're gonna take this whole thing, you know, and stream it from people's homes. We're gonna put the commissioner in his basement, and we're gonna do a bunch of video conferences, and we think that's gonna be better. They probably would have thrown us out of the room and taken away our Monday Night Football package just for fun. But you know, like, it just proved that things can be done differently at a moment of crisis. You might actually learn a few things. You might be able to change some things, like I said, that are too entrenched, or legacy issues that are just too big to handle too big to face under normal circumstances. And for that reason, we're really optimistic about when things do come back. Again, it might be a year where it's different. It might be different in certain aspects, you know, going forward. But we remain very optimistic about you know, how people are going to want to consume sports, and by association, how you know, advertisers and sponsors are going to want to monetize sports going forward. And the ACC network will, you know, like others, will benefit, because it was a viable business before this. It's going to be viable on whatever that looks like, you know, in 2020 and beyond.
That's really good. We've got a question from our friend Nikki Moore, who's up at Colgate. She wrote in and asked, what are some of the innovative ways you've seen institutions drive value for partners in this altered time period? Ben, you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the good news is that we're a little bit in the off season. So I think, you know, most of our thinking around here at Teal is thinking about, you know, when sports do come back, you know, what are we going to do to address kind of the new world as it is? And, you know, that is, as you know, I'm in the middle of writing a book. Probably no one will read it except my kids, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I knew this anecdotally, but I really didn't know until I started going back and studying really our records for all those years at ISP and IMG. 80% of the growth that we experienced as a company came during and in the first year after a recession. And we had 3 of those opportunities. And so what I think that says is that, you know, so I would challenge everyone on this call, as I try to challenge myself every day, to be using opportunities like this to be really introspective and thinking about all the ways that you don't touch your donors, your sponsors, that you're not servicing your constituency, and kind of come out of it with this new plan. I mean, I would tell you that I'm distressed to hear that, and I'm not in the rights business per se in terms of media rights yet today, but I find it kind of remarkable that you know, that the world could come unglued as much as it has in terms of the financial modeling in that space. And so you know, we spend a lot of time around here, you know, all these calls with athletic directors, they were pretty much all inbound calls. And, you know, where they've gotten a phone call from their rights holder who said, you know, we can't pay you this year. It's going to be a revenue share going forward, rights fees going down. And so the first question I get from a lot of these folks is, gosh, is there a better model? Is there a new way of doing business where I could still de-risk my institution and get back more control and put myself in a position where, as my rights holder went, I went? And I do think there's a better model. And I would say, you know, that you know, from our perspective, in answer to being able to answer the athletic directors and NFL team presidents we're talking to, NBA team presidents, et cetera, you know, really listening to where they feel like they have weak points, chinks in their armor, and out in the marketplace right now, trying to find other solution providers who, quite frankly, may not be as financially well off as our firm is, and bring those companies into our fold so that we can be more of a you know, offer a broader suite of service provisions and solution provisions for all of our partners, whether they're institutions or whether they're professional sports teams. And so I think this is I mean, this very moment gives us a chance to really be eyes open, ears open, and really tuned in to a lot of things that kind of go by us in the wind every day, because we're all so busy in all of our different pursuits. And what I've learned is that, you know, that every single person I've talked to has identified for us anywhere from 1 to 5 different things that they knew that they could do better, but they'd never really had the time to focus on it. And it would help them raise more money, generate more revenue, create and burnish their brand better. To me, that's what a moment, when I say don't waste a crisis, that's what I mean, is to kind of dig in and understand where the chinks in your armor so that the next time you do face, hopefully not a pandemic, but whatever the next crisis is that comes up, or economic recession that comes up, that you've built a stronger buttress and fortress against that. So that'd kind of be my 2 cents on that.
You know, I've heard some important words in all your comments that seem to be consistent. Burke mentioned innovation, and Nikki, I think from your question, you know, being innovative in a changing environment and maybe doing some things that you hadn't tried before really makes a lot of sense. And then Ben's comment about the ability to communicate regularly with your key stakeholders and partner with them on your path going forward, and the innovative pieces of that make tremendous amount of sense. I want to shift gears ever so slightly. You know, name, image, and likeness has been in the news. It's been deferred by the NCAA until January before they'll take formal action on it. But I've always been concerned that the institution's brand and its investment in protecting the revenues that come from that could be in some ways undermined by the opportunity for students to use the institution's brand to market themselves. Ben, you know, you've worked with the Nikes of the world, the Adidases, the Coca-Colas, the great partners and sponsors that have always supported college athletics, as have all three of you. Are any of you concerned that name, image, and likeness, if not written properly, could take revenues that you've been accustomed to getting off your table?
So I'm going to jump right in on that because I spend a lot of time on this. I would tell you the Tom McMillan's group that many of you are part of did a study, and then there was another follow-on study that were both published in the USA Today and others. And one of them, I see my friend Bubba Cunningham down there somewhere, and he's apparently breaking the law in North Carolina because it looks like he's in his office on campus, not at his house. But you know, there was an article that said that Cole Anthony, who was the really uber talented guard that plays for the Tar Heels, would garner on this estimate $440,000 a year from name, image, and likeness. Now, if you're Coca-Cola or Pepsi or who, just pick a company. You have a budget for your advertising and marketing, and that budget is, you know, under scrutiny every year. You have shareholders you report to, and it's a pie, and that pie has got a finite size to it. If Cole Anthony gets $440,000 out of a pie from name, image, and likeness, that is likely going to diminish some of the dollars that the University of North Carolina is going to get otherwise from sponsorship. So if you don't, you know, you can't say this is going to be like incrementally added on by big companies, because that's not how they work. And so I think, you know, people just have to be cognizant and aware. And so having some kind of you know, the universities being able to be in a role where there's some way to create some balance in that, I think is extraordinarily important. You still have time to kind of fix that and not wait for somebody else to fix it for you. And the other part is unintended consequence is, you know, would any other student athletes at the University of North Carolina get that money? And are you going to have this disparity of a star who gets $440,000, another kid gets 10, and the other 10 kids on the team get 0? And I think that creates a cultural issue on campuses. And so I'm not picking on Carolina. There's somebody on every campus that you can point to. And I mean, we all need to pay attention to it. And I would just say that it would be out of the ordinary for colleges and universities to create the solution for themselves. I mean, normally the solution is created by someone else, and then it's brought into the college and university world. This is one time where I think athletic directors really need to pay attention, and they need to be activists, because the one thing that you have on your campus in most of your departments and with most of your teams is great culture. And money will absolutely, money's not evil. It's how people that get the money are and behave. But I'm just telling you, it is a potential corrupting influence. And I would love to see more activism, not just at the NCAA level, but at the campus level, for dealing with what is a potential windfall for a very, very small group of people.
Kevin, your thoughts about that?
You know, there's really, maybe I've got it bifurcated into two dimensions. One, and I won't go back over what Ben just described. I think it potentially is a redistribution of resources. I like his analogy of the pie. The pie is the pie. People, there's so many resources available within a given community or even nationally. And if we start divvying up those resources differently, there's going to be winners and losers. And I'm very supportive of what we can do for student athletes, but at the expense of what I think it may do to the institution, and more importantly to athletics, it does make me concerned. We're going to have to see how the whole financial side plays out. I think Ben described it very, very well. On the other side, monitoring, compliance in terms of agents and boosters, having it become part of the recruiting process. I've got great friends on that committee. Yeah, Carla Williams represents us in the ACC. Bob Bowlesby, Gene Smith. These are longtime colleagues and people that I admire greatly. And this has been such a heavy lift to do this. I mean, we were going to do this before we put together the task force, and so it was fait accompli that we were going to get to this place. But again, building a barbed wire fence around boosters and agents and the rest of it, unfortunately, isn't going to happen. And my sense is, and it isn't, I can't even characterize it as unintended consequence, but it will become an unintended reality. It just really will. And so this is going to find its way into the recruiting proposition, and unfortunately, this elusive level playing field that we all love to hunt for within the collegiate athletics community, I think is really going to be under attack. It's going to be really hard to see this thing play out. But at the end of the day, I want to say, if I was invited to serve on that committee, we'd be at exactly the same place. I think these people have represented our interests. These leaders, we've got some of our best on that task force, and they've taken us, unfortunately, because of some very strident public opinions, to the best place possible. But there are a lot of pieces here that keep me very, very concerned about going forward.
Well said. Any, I want to encourage questions or comments. These are very difficult circumstances that we're talking about. And Burke, I don't know how familiar you are with the name, image, and likeness issues that are being talked about, but I wouldn't know whether they would have any impact whatsoever on a media partner's participation in supporting college athletics. Will that distract you from what has been traditionally a good partnership with the institution?
No, I don't think so. I recognize the very complicated nature of this subject. I have some personal thoughts on it, but I also have some professional thoughts on it. I think you referenced something in the original question, which is, to me, the secret sauce is, how successful a job can the group charged with this do in writing, the ground rules, right? And then adapting over time, because unequivocally there'll be some things that occur that weren't anticipated. It's just a very complicated subject. Obviously, it's something I don't spend a lot of time thinking about in my core job responsibilities, but I recognize that it's front and center for a group like this. I would say one thing though: if you can solve this issue to everybody's satisfaction on both sides of the argument, I think college athletics stands to gain a significant amount of goodwill with rank and file fans in terms of having a sensible and realistic solution to this issue that people feel like maybe checks a box on the, again, fairness scale that they feel might be out of calibration currently. But as Ben and Kevin have noted, the devil's in the details, and man, there are a lot of details on this one.
Well, there sure are.
Yeah, may I say this, Burke? In my opinion, if in fact, as a community, a broader community, we are able to resolve this issue and get it in the right place, it'll be a great precursor to climate change. I mean, this is a big issue. It's a tough one, and as you said, complicated with a capital C.
Yeah, we might have to pivot to climate change before this one. Who knows?
Yes.
Todd, we've got a comment from Bubba Cunningham at UNC.
Well, unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, Ben, I just want to make sure you understand that nobody else considers it, but I consider myself essential personnel, so I am here. I've been trying to build up some equity with the campus, so leave me alone.
You're essential as my partner in any golf match I play with anybody.
Two things that have happened. Kevin, I share your thoughts about the committee and the people we have on it is absolutely fantastic. One thing I'm still unclear on with the NCAA path is I personally don't think that opening everything up with the hopes that we might get some type of a antitrust exemption is a good strategic plan. And so I guess I disagree with the plan itself, which led us to this position. The other thing that of note, in my view, is in the last 2 weeks, we've seen two wonderful examples of students that had a choice. One chose to go to the G League and one chose to go to college. And the more we can talk about choices for kids, as opposed to making ours look exactly like a pro model, would be a better model for me than one that just says, we're going to just throw our hands up, jump into the name, image, and likeness and professional model, and then try to carve it out over here with boosters and agents that we're going to somehow control that. We can't control that now. But if we open it up, I see no way, and Todd mentioned there's no way our compliance people can handle what we've got in front of us. So I guess I never got on board because I never bought into the initial philosophy that we had to do it. I still believe that our model is our model and we should continue to defend it vigorously. And the ones I would have gone to if I were pushed, I'd have gone to the group license and I'd have gone to selling jerseys.
Thanks, Bubba. Well said. Well said. We've got just a couple more minutes. I want to get our panelists to, well, one of them can do this really easily. The other two of you get to be the AD for the day. So would each one of you just talk for a second? If you could make changes in the long-term future of college athletics to control spending, where would you make those changes? And we'll let the rookie ADs wait while Dr. White, who's been an AD for multiple years, tells us how he would control spending in the future.
You know, I've been involved for way too long, as most people would suggest. 38 years as an AD, and I coached for 9 before that, so this is year 47. And I think year 1 and 2, in my year 1 and 2, we were having that same conversation about how do we control costs, and it's just really hard. And I don't know with a straight face if I can pontificate how we do that. I think I have a pretty good sense that you know, we're not going to be able to do a lot in terms of with NCAA regulation, potential antitrust violations, lawsuits, and the like. And institutions do enjoy a lot of autonomy, and they've wanted to have that autonomy, and they are subject to self-regulation and or state regulation. That would be private versus public, just in the macro sense. So I don't know, Todd, how you do it other than when resources become scarce, not unlike this moment. It does, your impulse is to scenario and draw back and find ways to maybe better expend resources, stretch resources, and unfortunately we've always run to the other end of that paradigm and have thought about raising additional resources. But I think we've harvested for the low-hanging fruit. I really do believe that within college athletics, and where a lot of us are really living on a pretty high level of philanthropy. And of course, when the economy takes a right-hand curve, everything becomes a little bit more difficult. I'm not sure I have a really good answer as to how we control costs. You know, we've done the communication thing. We've had the task force. Hell, I was on the committee that the late Gene Corrigan chaired back in '91, I think it was, a cost containment committee. And we came up with all kinds of solutions and had outside counsel with the NCAA and ended up paying about $60 million when we lost a lawsuit. And we had everybody, all the big players in college athletics. I was the kid on the committee. I was at the University of Maine. But I mean, I won't go, Cedric Dempsey, everybody was on the committee. And I can tell you that there's been a lot of efforts, but we haven't been able to pull that one off yet. And I've only been around almost 4 decades. And so if somebody has a good idea as to how we might make that happen, I'm all ears. I just don't know how we do it.
Well, rookie AD Burke Magnus has all kinds of ideas about controlling costs. So Burke, you're the AD now. How are you going to control costs going forward?
Well, thanks for forcing me into solving a question that Kevin White hasn't been able to solve in 40 years. But I guess I would say this, which is, and this is what we're doing in our enterprise right now, which is, and it goes back to the very first question you asked today, Todd, which is, you know, the opportunity that this crisis presents to consider, again, all kinds of things. At Disney, we're looking at, you know, how much physical space do we actually need? You know, have people been quite effective in terms of working from home or video conferencing, our travel budgets, how many meetings do we really need to take in person? How many events do we need to go to? How many people do we need there? How much expense can be looked at relative to the costs of production, you know, at our events? Can things be done remotely? We had already started pivoting in that direction, as people who are familiar with the conference networks and you know, are familiar with. So I mean, again, to me, it's sort of like a question of, is this the moment where, you know, some sacred cow budgets or topics can be talked about in real terms? Maybe nothing changes, but, you know, this is a moment to address those kinds of things and see if there's anything to be gained in areas where it would have been sort of unrealistic to consider it or unthinkable to consider it in the past. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking at relative to, you know, to the expense side of our ledger at Disney, where frankly, as you guys well know, you know, a large part of our business every year is centralized around gathering large groups of people in locations, be they theme parks, cruise ships, you know, movie theaters, etc. So we have a lot of those same conversations with different lines on the budget.
Ben, you always wanted to be an AD. This is your chance. Where are you going to control?
Hey, I couldn't get the job.
You've done okay.
And you made it sound so alluring to me. So I would say, well, first of all, when this is over, stay on, because Hickey and Barnes and Mullins and I are going to do one of those YouTube things where we're each going to sing in our little block and everybody can watch us. So, you know, I grew up on a farm in eastern North Carolina, and I would say that my parents provided us a wonderful lower middle class life. Best they could do. They were the first people in their family to go to college. My dad was a CFO of a little Southern Baptist school. My mother was a kindergarten teacher at the little Episcopal church in Murfreesboro, North Carolina. Had 5 kids at home. You know, I got to go to Wake Forest because there were people who were generous enough to give money, to give scholarships to, you know, kids from eastern North Carolina to go there. Hence, a lot of my philanthropy obviously is directed back at my alma mater, because I know that I wouldn't be where I was if it weren't for that step in my life. I'm a big free market capitalist, and I think markets ultimately work themselves out. It's not politically correct to say this in the midst of this group, but I just, you know, I'm always the guy that's probably saying the stuff that other people might be thinking. I don't have a filter, as most of you know, so my inside voice is always outside. You know, I could see over the next 5 to 10 years where, you know, spurred on by this potential elongated economic crisis, where you rework the level at which schools played. In other words, you know, what's the right number of people playing at the very highest level or schools and programs? What's the right level at the next, or the right structure for the next level down? I think that, you know, every school in the country has to think about, you know, the number of sports teams you field, and it ought not to be driven by what some anachronistic rule is at the NCAA. It ought to be driven by what fits at your place, and what can you do to compete, both on the field of play and in the classroom. but I'm just a big believer of being great at the things that you can be great at. And, you know, I subscribe entirely to Jim Collins' treatise of Good to Great. That good is the mortal enemy of great. I believe it in every facet of life. I try to practice it in my life. And I just think you're either trying to be great at what it is that you are focused on, or you lapse back to the place where I think 90% of America resides, where you're satisfied with just being good. And the biggest thing I think is, you know, I always encourage our team to be really courageous in the way they think about decision-making and planning. And I love, there's an old saying that goes, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? And I think if you use that as kind of a governing mantra, you're always aspiring for great. And so that would be what I would close on. And great to be with you and to be on here with National Football Foundation gold medal winner Burke Magnus and Hall of Fame AD Kevin White. Kevin, you had to hear some of the same stuff twice in a week. Sorry.
You were great in my class, Ben. Love you.
Love you too.
So clearly, we're at the end of our time. Clearly, we're in a time of crisis, and you never want to let that go to waste, as our good friend Winston Churchill said. And I'll leave you with this one thought, because having sat in those AD chairs, all of us know how difficult it is from time to time. So we'll leave you with one last word from Winston, and that is, if you're going through hell, just keep going. You'll get out of it soon.
That's good.
Best to everyone, thank you for your participation today. To Burke, to Kevin, Ben, we're grateful. Tune in next time, guys. Thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
See ya.
Take care, everybody.